I've watched every Simpsons episode set in the future, as well as all of the flash forward scenes in order to bring you the most concise video on every character's future.
You president, me, pot CEO and owner of 3 NBA teams?
So I'm going to break down who marries who, how many kids everyone has, who becomes a cyborg or a clone, who moves to Mars, and how they all eventually die. And we've got over 65 characters to talk about, so let's begin. Abraham Simpson. Starting with one of the oldest coups in Springfield and patriarch of the Simpsons family, Abe weirdly appears to outlive everyone. Now, it seemed as though he died in the episode Barthood when Bart was a teenager, but it's later revealed that he's actually frozen in Springfield's underground cryogenic facility. Homer eventually unfreezes his dad on Christmas Day, 30 years from the present day, and the two finally make amends after years and years of animosity.
I love you, Dad.
Ah. Agnes Skinner. Seymour's overbearing mother is likened to Norman Bates' uncomfortable relationship with his mother in Psycho.
There's Mother now, watching me.
So it's unsurprising that Skinner still keeps Agnes' skeleton and takes her out to dinner. Talk about mummy issues. I think Edna really did the right thing by leaving that mama's boy at the altar. Sorry, Skinner. Apu Nahasa Pima Petalon. Now, we haven't really heard or seen from this guy in the last 5 years, basically because his character was quietly written out from the show. This is after Hank Azaria announced that he was stepping away from the role because he no longer felt comfortable voicing an Indian character. Now, I'm not here to talk about the controversy, I'm only here to talk about the future. And let me tell you, even in his later years, Apu is still running his beloved Quickie Mart. But at least now he has his team of pre-teen kiddos to help, mostly by bullying their employee Bart Simpson. And if you thought Apu would finally get some peace with his 8 children all grown up, then think again, as each of his octuplets will have octuplets too. So ever the busy grandpa, Apu will help to look after all 64 grandchildren. We don't know how Apu dies, but his head might just find its way to the year 3000. Because according to Simpsons and Futurama Wiki, you can see Apu's head in an episode of Futurama. Although I'm not entirely convinced that it's him. But what do you guys think? Barney Gumble. Despite getting off the drunken wagon and getting sober in season 11, Barney relapses and becomes a drunken barfly all over again in season 14.
I finally got Barney back on the sauce. If he doesn't have fun, he could easily slip right back into sobriety.
And even in his old age, Barney can be found at Moe's Tavern with a duff in his hand. Cheers, Barney. Baby Gerald. This monobrow baby has been Maggie's sworn enemy since season 5. At least he was, because we find out that they actually date in the future. I guess all the animosity could have been a way for them to hide their feelings. A Simpsons comic even reveals that this date blossoms into a real relationship, with issue 47 even showing the future Simpsons family with Gerald and Maggie being married. But it seems they aren't the happiest couple, as Gerald always interrupts Maggie before she speaks, a running gag that is in many future episodes in The Simpsons.
Stop everything!
We find out in Maggie's future that she'll have a daughter, but the father is unknown.
So, who's the father?
Could it be that Gerald is the baby daddy? Bart Simpson. Although Bart is a struggling student and a full-time slacker, he will actually become super successful later on in life. After he graduates, he opens up his own BMX shop, then gets married to a woman called Gender in his 20s, and together they have 2 sons, Jiff and Skippy. But Bart never truly grows up, with his immaturity ultimately causing their divorce. He'll move back into his old school, which has now been turned into crummy apartments. But luckily, his life doesn't end here, because Bart finally steps up to become the real dad to his kids. He also convinces his sister, President Lisa, to legalize weed after helping her with some diplomatic relations.
Legalize what? Oh, consider it done.
And after this, he'll then start his own cannabis business called High Caramba. Presumably from the earnings of his pop businesses as well as owning a couple of NBA teams, Bart will put himself through law school and become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And after this, Bart will finally be able to take his elderly dad Homer to a re-release screening of the Itchy and Scratchy movie, showing that after all of their ups and downs, they'll finally have a great relationship. Later on, we see an elderly Bart in a retirement home as he looks back fondly over his life.
What a great ride.
As for how he dies, Bart will go down as the true prankster prince. He spells out Skinner sucks in fireworks, causing his old principal to have a heart attack, and when Skinner slumps over his electric chair, he runs over the jubilant Bart. And so Bartholomew Jojo Simpson dies at the age of 80. Carl Carlson. Lenny and Carl go together like peas and carrots. These two are best buds and they're always seen together, so it's no surprise to learn that in their future, Carl and Lenny will switch brains, now being so close that they're literally in each other's heads.
Hey, Lenny.
I'm Carl.
Don't you remember? You came to the brain-switching ceremony.
Clancy Wiggum. Springfield's chief of police may be the laziest, most corrupt cop there is, but this job means everything to him. It's all he knows, and he doesn't know very much.
Oh, for gosh, can't you people solve these problems yourselves?
So it's no surprise that he'll still be the law in Springfield in the future. In fact, he even gets a fancy tech upgrade and becomes RoboCop. Wiggum will later on somehow get his old body back and gain a massive amount of weight. It must have been all of those Lard Lad donuts. But when he's 62, he'll shoot down Homer in the streets when he mistakenly thinks he's robbed a bank, but it turns out it's only a food bank. Wiggum then eats Homer's sandwich, which chokes him to death, but at least he'll go out doing the one thing he really, really loves. Eating, if you couldn't guess. Cletus Spuckler. Although he may look like a simple redneck, don't let his appearance deceive you, because this hillbilly will somehow become the freaking Vice President of the United States.
You want me to attend the funeral of the Sultan of Brunei?
Comic book guy. So far, we haven't really seen a great deal of what Jeffrey Albertson is like in the future, as he's been strangely absent from the Flash Forward episodes. But in the most recent seasons, he got married to Kamiko, and the last we saw of them was when they were talking about kids. So expect some very sarcastic comic book babies on the way very soon. The Crazy Cat Lady. Poor Eleanor. Once a respected doctor and lawyer, the pressures of the job took a massive toll on her mental health. Her condition soon deteriorated to the point where she became the Crazy Cat Lady.
Can anyone who loves animals that much really be crazy?
She did at one point get better and return to her former self, only to relapse very quickly afterwards. And all we really know about her future is that she is also frozen in Springfield's cryogenic facility. Disco Stew. This party boy was briefly married to Selma Bouvier and happened to be one of the only husbands that Marge actually liked.
The only husband of Selma's I liked was Disco Stew. He was so upbeat.
But the party had to end sometime, as 30 years from the present day, Stu will undergo an operation to rid himself of his disco obsession.
It's a whole new day for nothing stew.
Dolph Starbeam. Dolph is of course one of the main bullies at Springfield Elementary, along with Jimbo and Kearney, and you'd have thought that they'd grow out of robbing people of their lunch money, but no. Because 30 years into the future, the bullies will continue to pick on poor Milhouse. But this time, the dud is a fearless zombie who uses Wiggum to knock the thugs down, and then proceeds to eat their brains. So it's true what they say, crime doesn't pay. Dr. Julius Hibbert. This giggling chief of surgery will continue being the Simpsons' primary doctor for many years to come. He helped deliver Maggie into the world, and he'll also go on to deliver her very own baby too. When Dr. Hibbert retires, he'll spend his twilight years watching his old CCTV tapes and finally catches the nurse who was stealing his sponges.
She was stealing sponges. I knew it.
Duffman. Did you know that there isn't just one Duff Man? In fact, several actors have donned the red and blue spandex over the years, many of whom have met a tragic end.
Duff Man can never die. Only the actors who play him. Oh yeah!
The most current Duff Man who we know today has a daughter who he was estranged to for many years, but just recently reconciled with her in the latest season. But being a beer mascot is the only life Duff Man knows and has, still promoting the brand well into old age.
Oh yeah!
Edna Krabappel. Oh, Edna, this one's gonna break my heart. Sadly, Marsha Wallace passed away in 2013, 1 week before her 71st birthday, and as a sign of respect for the late and great actress, Edna's character was retired from the show, and her character died quietly off screen. And although she's gone, Marsha and Edna leave behind a great legacy.
Sure do miss that laugh.
I miss her too.
But future episodes have shown that she's alive and well, even appearing at Lisa's wedding, so I choose to believe that the character of Edna will be alive and happy in the future. Fat Tony. Now we've come to my absolute favourite character in the show, the Don Marion Anthony D'Amico, aka Fat Tony. After countless run-ins with Homer, the two would finally become friends in the episode Donny Fatso. But with a guy like Homer, you can't keep him too close. He may just end up killing ya. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened, as the mafia boss died of a heart attack when he learned that Homer was in fact an FBI informant. And so he was replaced by his cousin Fit Tony, who then transitioned into Fit Fat Tony after eating too much Italian food. And I have to say that I hate this storyline. But anyway, let's move on. Gary Chalmers. By the time of Bart and Lisa's graduation, the Super Nintendo Chalmers will have suffered a stim attack, whatever that is. But fast forward another 10 years and Chalmers is cured and healthy again, even healthy enough to run against Lisa for the state school superintendent job. But after some backwards and sexist remarks, he will step down.
I concede. Congratulations.
So, either because of the humiliation of losing or because his illness has come back, Chalmers will also be cryogenically frozen underground. Gil Gunderson. Poor old Gil. He is perhaps the other most tragic character in The Simpsons. He can never seem to catch a break or even hold a job down.
You're fired!
Perhaps that is why he will also freeze himself at the same facility as Grandpa and Superintendent Chalmers. Let's just hope that when he's defrosted, the future will look a little bit brighter for Gil, and he'll finally be able to get a stable job. Groundskeeper Willie. 10 years from the present day and Willie is still working at Springfield Elementary. But sometime after this, Willie will be tragically eaten by boiler room rats. And in his honour, a statue will be erected, tributing him in the schoolyard of where he worked. Homer Simpson. We've seen so much of Homer's future, so I'm gonna have to give you the Cliff Notes version of this. Basically, because Homer is so accident-prone, Professor Frink will make dozens and dozens of clones of the clumsy baboon-like man. Which is a great thing, because Homer dies a lot. And I mean a lot. To the point where Professor Frink finally runs out of clones. So Homer then has to live as a digital being inside of a TV, but on the upside, later on he will get a fancy new robot body and will be able to move around a lot more freely.
Come on! Hug your grandpa, boys!
But besides his physicalities, I love that throughout the future episodes, Homer has now learned from his mistakes in raising Bart, and is a really great grandpa to Jiff and Skippy. And in the far, far future, Homer is shown to be just a head on a robot.
Joe!
Jasper Beardsley. Jasper once tried to freeze himself in the Quickie Mart fridge and didn't want to be thawed out until robot wives were cheap and effective. Unfortunately, this plan didn't work out too well for Frostilicus, so instead of using a convenience store fridge, he'll later pay to be frozen properly at Springfield's cryogenic facility. Jeremy Friedman. Jeremy, aka Squeaky Voice Teen, has had more jobs than Homer Simpson, and that's saying something. He suffered through pretty much every minimum wage job that Springfield has ever had. And in addition to his many jobs, poor Jeremy is known for his greasy skin.
My God, you're greasy.
And of course, his unbroken voice. And even 10 years into the future, his voice still hasn't broken.
The corn isn't sticking to the dogs. Why did I waste 30 minutes training you?
But on the upside, he will rise through the ranks into becoming a supervisor at the corn dog stand. That's something, right? Jeremy Jailbird. This little cutie is Snake Jailbird's son, and despite being Springfield's resident bad boy, Snake is surprisingly a very loving daddy to him.
That's my little dude.
But does Jeremy follow in his father's footsteps, or does he do something more productive with his life? Unfortunately, it's the former, as we'll see an older Jeremy attempting to rob a train until he is stopped by bounty hunter Nelson Muntz. Jimbo Jones. Local bully Jimbo has been held back in school so much he's probably in his mid-30s by now. And that's no joke, just take a look at this bald spot.
It's not fair! You know that's hilarious!
But Jimbo will eventually graduate and start dating Krusty's daughter Sophie. Their dating will go so well that they get married and Nelson will be his best man, with Kearney and Dolph by his side as his groomsmen. But despite being a happily married man, Jimbo will eventually go back into his old patterns as he threatens Lisa and Zombie Millhouse. And like how we discussed with Dolph, he will also be killed and eaten by Millhouse. Jonathan Frank. In season 16's future drama, Frank introduces Bart and Lisa to his time viewing machine, showing them 8 years into their future. And even though their futures seem pretty active, Frank certainly wasn't. Because when Bart returns to Frank's house 8 years later, we only see his skeleton. Although this might just be one of Frank's clones, as he appears alive and well in other future episodes. In Lisa's wedding, Frank is shown leading a team trying to discover the cure for 17 stab wounds in Mr. Burns' back. Frank will spend his later years making numerous clones for Homer every time he dies. Now, I don't really know why he'd want to dedicate 30 years of his life to try and revive a guy who just wants to eat himself to death, but maybe he felt sorry for Lisa for losing her father over and over again. As it's been shown before, that these two brainiacs can be quite close. Kang and Kodos. This drooling alien duo have mostly been confined to the Treehouse of Horror specials. But they have appeared in a few episodes outside of these, like Gunprost, and there was even an episode when the Simpsons family go to the aliens' home planet. And while these may not be canon, what is the episode The Old Blue Mare, She Ain't What She Used to Be. In it, Marge Simpson becomes the mayor of Springfield, and by the end there is a flash forward to 5 years into the future. It's here where we see Marge walking through a hall dedicated to her political career, and we see that she will meet Kang and Kodos, marking the first ever official alien contact. Kearney. So now we've come to the last of the 3 bullies, and like Jimbo and Kearney, he was also held back in school, and I mean really held back. Despite being in the 5th grade, he's been divorced and even has a son called Kearney Jr.
I sleep in a drawer.
And Kearney only hopes that his boy will follow in his footsteps.
No, son, you let him finish, then you smash it.
And like Jimbo, Kearney eventually graduates and becomes the vice principal of Springfield Elementary, and he also becomes a grandpa. But like the others, he too gets killed by Zombie Millhouse, although we do see him later on as President Lisa's bodyguard. So maybe Professor Frank cloned him, or maybe it was a wizard or something. Krusty the Clown. This beloved TV entertainer was Bart Simpson's most favourite celebrity in the world, and he collected Krusty everything, even pregnancy tests. So it must have come as quite a surprise when the 18-year-old Bart finds that his hero will be dating his own mother.
Krusty the Clown is dating your mom!
Ultimately, things don't work out too well for them when Marge ditches this clown's ass for another one when she gets back with Homer. Flash forward 20 years from that moment, and an incredibly old Krusty is still hosting his own show.
I miss eating.
Lenny. Now, we've already covered Carl's future, but what about his best friend Lenny? Well, it's the exact same. They swap brains. And personally, I think this is the perfect outcome for Lenny, as it always seemed that he liked Carl far more than Carl liked him.
I carved that one wonderful summer.
Lou and Eddie. Due to the chief's incompetence, Wiggum's right and left-hand men are the only ones upholding Springfield's law and order.
Eddie, Lou, how about a little backup here?
And ever the dutiful Cobbs, they'll always stick by Wiggum's side, even if not always by choice.
Just let me die.
And just like their chief, Lou and Eddie will also get a cool new RoboCop makeover. Lisa Simpson. Being the most intelligent student at Springfield Elementary, it should come as no surprise that little Lisa will literally go to the very top. She'll attend prestigious Yale University or Harvard, as they've changed this a few times over the show, and while at college, Lisa will explore her sexuality and start dating women, even becoming a throuple at one point. At college, she'll also meet an English chap called Hugh. They'll quickly fall in love and decide to get married, but Hugh will not be able to stand Lisa's boorish American family.
I said pull my finger.
He informs her on the wedding day that she will never be able to see them again, so Lisa quite rightly dumps the pig and walks out. After this, Lisa marries Milhouse of all people, and she gives birth to a girl called Zia, although Zia will technically not be Milhouse's biological daughter. Lisa and the Dudds' marriage won't be a happy one, but all that will change when Milhouse gets bitten and turned into a zombie. This mutation makes Milhouse brave in protecting Lisa from some thugs.
The old Milhouse would have been helpless with an asthma attack.
And because of this, she'll actually prefer him as a zombie than his real self. But it looks like that Milhouse will get a cure eventually, leading them into a divorce. Lisa will then go on to become the President of the United States of America, and after Lisa completes her terms, she'll move over to Mars with her mum. Later on in life, Lisa will live at a Buddhist monastery, and upon achieving enlightenment, she will realise that it was just one big waste of time. This is before suffering a heart attack and dying at the age of 98. Maggie Simpson. Now, Maggie rarely talks, as we all know, only saying a handful of one-liners throughout the show's 30-year run, so it's very ironic that Maggie ends up becoming a freaking singing superstar. In Lisa's wedding, Dr. Hibbert comments on her lovely singing voice.
She's quite a hellion, but she does have an incredible voice.
And in Holidays of Future Past, Maggie has become a global rock star and has a wild lifestyle to match, sleeping with every single member of her band, to the point that she doesn't even know the father of her own baby.
Can you tell me who the father is?
Now, if you're wondering how Maggie will die, the good news is that she doesn't, as Maggie will become the ultimate superstar. Quite literally, she'll become immortal and be at one with space and the cosmos. Manjula. Much like Apu, Manjula isn't around much these days, and we've already covered that she and Apu will have 64 grandchildren, but what about her life after this? Well, after Apu passes away, she'll then go on to marry Ned Flanders, joining his very long list of dead wives. Maud Flanders. As we all know, Maud Flanders died in season 11 after returning with some snacks for the car rally, which definitely didn't include footlongs.
My last words to Maud were, no footlongs.
But mischievous Maud won't let a little thing like death get in the way of making a comeback, as she'll return as a ghost 30 years from now and go on to date Ned again. Marge Simpson. Marge has gone through so many jobs over the years. Cop, bodybuilder, but one of her most prominent and important was Mayor of Springfield. And 8 years after being impeached, as discussed, she'll tour a hall dedicated to her political career. We'll see that she gets to meet the Pope, as well as being the first to greet the aliens, Kang and Kodos, to Earth. Now, Marge and Homer have always had their ups and downs, and they'll continue to do so for many years to come. When Marge is around the age of 45, she'll leave Homer after he blows their savings on an underwater home, and she'll go on to date Krusty for a short while. But yet again, her and Homer will reconcile, and she'll actually grow to like their underwater house. They might fight and break up again and again, but they'll always find their way back to each other. Their stars just align. And when their daughter becomes the President of the United States, Marge and Homer will live at the White House with her.
Be nice to your brother, Lisa.
Anyway, while at the White House, the couple will go on a mission to search for Lincoln's hidden gold.
My gold is in the heart of every freedom-loving American.
Ah, crap!
And for a little while after Lisa's presidential term, Marge will go on to settle on Mars. And eventually, when Homer has exhausted all of his clones and finally passes on, Marge will seek companionship with her neighbour Ned Flanders. Which does make a whole lot of sense, seeing as they've always had a little bit of sexual tension, with a fair few almost kisses.
Your perfectly trimmed mustache.
Now, looking at her death right here, it could be that Marge just simply passed of old age, or it could have been that Ned poisoned her. Martin Prince. The episode Lisa the Boy Scout revealed that Martin was actually a 40-year-old undercover cop who is married with 2 kids and a 3rd one on the way.
You're a great role model for your kids. All 3 of them.
But of course, this was a non-canon episode separate from the main continuity. Also, fun fact, I may have been in this episode. But the real future of Martin is that he might be trans. Because when a 40-year-old Lisa is going through her Facebook, a friend request from Marsha Princess comes up. And Martin's fluidity in sexuality and gender has been hinted at in the show before.
I'm not gay, I'm nothing yet!
Mayor Quimby. Springfield's corrupt mayor has never had any qualms about dipping into the town's budget for his own selfish reasons. Like using the street repair fund to build a secret swimming pool.
We've discovered the ruins of an ancient city!
But his embezzlement crimes will finally catch up to him when he'll be forced out and disgraced from office. He'll be forced to go into hiding by changing his name and working as a cab driver for Otto's transport company. Milhouse Van Houten. As Bart's law sidekick, Milhouse usually gets in trouble by association, and Bart's bad influence will only continue into their teen years when Bart knocks out some streetlights, and poor Milhouse gets the blame and shipped off into juvie. While there, he'll start working out and get super shredded, so much so that at his graduation, he'll get so big that he'll tear out of his rented tux. And he's definitely not getting big the natty way. My theory is that he's on the juice because of his severe anger issues. Milhouse will finally get off the steroids and start to resemble his dad. He'll then get a supervisor job at the power plant and then become Homer's boss. And Milhouse's previous fantasies of dating Lisa will finally come true when he ends up getting married to her. But as we've discussed, it's definitely not a happy one, as Lisa doesn't want an ounce of his DNA for their own child.
When we had her, they used only the best genetic material, which meant none of mine.
That's harsh, man. Things will only get worse for him when he becomes a mindless zombie, which he will then eventually recover from and become the Secretary of State under President Lisa. As discussed, Lisa and him do get divorced, so I think he's probably still a supportive partner, but one better by her side in her career rather than her bed. Miss Hoover. As Lisa's 2nd grade school teacher, she seems like she absolutely hates her job, but to be fair, I think I would too if I had to deal with Ralph every day.
I don't have a red crayon.
Why not?
I ate it.
Something that will cheer her up though is sleeping with an adult Bart in 30 years' time.
Now I see why they call you Miss Hoover. You must have been vacuuming for an hour.
And that's just wrong. Thankfully, this is just a simulation inside Bart's head, and hopefully this never happens in real life. But what does happen is her marriage to Ned, as her portrait can also be seen on Ned's wall of dead wives. Is this becoming more than a coincidence? Mo Sislak. So it's no secret that the loneliest bartender in the world has had a pretty lousy and depressing life.
I'm so desperately lonely.
But do things look up for old Mo in the future? Well, not much. He'll still run his gloomy tavern, which literally has not changed in 30 years, and he'll spend his twilight years caring for Duffman. Not very glamorous, but at least he still has his bar charms to keep him company. So that's something. Oh yeah, and he also has a clone, so at least there is someone out there for him in the end, even if it's just himself. Montgomery Burns. Despite being the oldest man in Springfield, Mr. Burns will continue to have a long, evil and eventful life. I mean, at one point he'll even steal Christmas.
I miss Christmas.
But his wicked ways would come back to bite him in the form of 17 stab wounds in the back. And he will eventually be cured from these wounds, but he was thawed out a little too soon.
Can't feel anything below my cummerbund.
So, what's next for Mr. Burns? Well, he'll go on to surviving the end of the civilization of man, thanks to a robot body. And he's not alone, he's accompanied by his best friend Bobo and very, very special friend Smithers. Ned Flanders. Good old Neddy will become blind because of his laser eye surgery complications, but luckily it was just temporary. But one thing that isn't is his sex symbol status, as it seems that every lady in town wants a piece of stupid sexy Flanders. And they'll have him, because after burying 2 wives with Maud and Edna, it's revealed that he will go on to marry almost every woman in town. And counting all of these portraits on the memorial wall, it looks like he'll get married 47 times in total. So either Ned has terribly bad luck or he's a secret serial killer. All I'm saying is that it's a little sussy. But what's your theory? Let me know in the comments. Nelson Muntz. Aside from the Simpsons family, we've seen more of Nelson's future than any other character in the show. At his graduation, Nelson will get sisters Sherry and Terry pregnant. So with 4 children and unable to handle the responsibility, he will do exactly what his papa did all those years ago, and go out for some cigarettes. But Nelson would do the right thing eventually, stepping up and taking parental responsibility, even taking one of his boys to Lisa's wedding. Speaking of Lisa, these two will rekindle their romance a few times over the years. Like the time they met up after Lisa leaves college, where he's working as a bell ringer at a cathedral. Then fast forward another 5 years and Nelson will be working as a bounty hunter, and even after all this time he and Lisa will still have a thing for each other. They get together properly and start dating for a while, but it doesn't last long, as Lisa will then go on to marry Milhouse. Although she will admit to Bart that she still talks to Nelson on the phone.
Should I have married Nelson? 'Cause we still talk on the phone.
Perhaps maybe, just maybe, Nelson and Lisa are destined to be together. But only time will tell. Oh yeah, and another thing to mention is that Nelson will own his own bar called the Crab Shack and hires Bart and Ralph's crummy band to play at his venue. But it's undeniable that his greatest achievement was inventing the phrase "smell you later."
I can't believe smell you later replaced goodbye.
Smell you later!
Otto Man. Now there's not too much about Otto. To be honest, I think he's a bit of a wasted character in the show, and I'll gladly make a video all about it. But in terms of his future, he'll go on to start his own taxi cab company. Not bad for a guy who couldn't even pass his driving test.
Well, you failed every segment and misspelled bus on your application.
Dre.
Patty Bouvier. The Bouvier twins are always looking for Mr. and Mrs. Right. And after years of fruitless searching, they instead have ones made for them. In about 30 years' time, they show off their new robot partners, only for them to run off with each other instead. But do not worry, Patty won't die alone, as she'll also marry Ned Flanders, despite being a lesbian. Ralph Wiggum. Although you may think this paste-eating Ralph is a bit of a simpleton, he's actually quite intelligent.
Me fail English? That's impossible.
I mean, heck, he even ran for President of the United States. Ralph will follow in his daddy's footsteps and become a cop. In fact, Springfield's law force is made of nothing but Ralph clones. And perhaps this was all a plan for Ralphie to take over the town, because little Ralphie will then go on to become the King of America. Right up until his scheming son poisons him at the age of 120. Reverend Lovejoy. We see Reverend Lovejoy being a minister for Lisa and Hugh's wedding, and when it gets cancelled, he will lay the blame at not getting married in a church.
Instead of out here in the cheap showiness of nature.
A church where he'll be working very, very hard at every one of Homer's many funerals. Rod and Todd. Now, Rod and Todd are heavily sheltered children and will continue to live with their dad well into their 20s.
Time for bed.
Yay!
They are also revealed to be part of the LGBTQ+ community in the episode But the Future. This is explored further in Simpsons Comics 47, where Ned explains that he uses his pension to pay for their estrogen treatments. And as a nice little fact, it's in this same comic where we also see them as lounge singers. It's nice to see that even though Ned can be a bigot, it's still nice to see that he supports his kids' choices. Santa's Little Helper and Snowball. Now, how can I not include the Simpsons pets in this list? They've been in the show since the first episode, and in the future they will only evolve into super intelligent beings. Don't ask me why and don't ask me how, but I think this is a nice time to move on.
Father, what am I?
Selma Bouvier. Getting married and divorced 5 times, Selma is just a lady looking for a little bit of happiness in her life. And even 20 or so years into the future, she's still hoping for love. She will also, as mentioned with Patty, get a love robot who runs away from her and will also marry Ned. At least she got a nice one in the end. We think. Seymour Skinner. Being a principal means everything to Seymour. He loves his school and he will never leave it, not even when it's shut down and converted into apartments, as he will become Bart's landlord.
Just get me that rent or you'll be expelled.
You mean evicted?
At the age of 119, Skinner gets a heart attack from one of Bart's firework pranks, Sherry and Terry. Now, I've always found these twins to be really, really mean and very, very freaky.
Your daddy's gonna kill you.
In fact, I think that they've got a third sister who they potentially murdered. I made a whole video on it if you're interested. But anyway, as we talked about earlier, in Nelson's future, they will both get pregnant and have twin boys. Sideshow Bob. Robert Underdunk Terwilliger Jr.'s ultimate goal in life was to kill Bart Simpson. It was literally all he could think about. And it was because of this obsession that he lost his wife and son Francesca and Gino. Ultimately, Sideshow Bob befriended Bart and gave up on his quest to kill him. It seems that in the future he will spend his time alone living in a lighthouse, away from civilization. And the last we saw of him was when he was striking up a romance with another lighthouse keeper. So at least we know in our hearts that he may not be alone forever. Snake Jailbird. Snake Jailbird's favourite pastime is holding up a poo at the Quickie Mart, and they've done it so much over the years that they've even formed some sort of dysfunctional relationship, and even attend couple counselling. But Snake Jailbird will really step up his robberies by turning himself into a cyborg with machine guns. Now, my theory is that Snake doesn't do this for the money. I think it's just his way of spending some more time with a poo, which is a bit warped, but still is kinda cute. Sophie. Despite being absent for most of her life, Sophie tracked her daddy down one day, only for him to be Krusty the Clown.
I finally found my daddy!
Ugh.
And after entertaining kids for decades, Krusty had no idea of how to deal with a child one-on-one. But Krusty did eventually come through and become a half-decent dad to her. As explained earlier, an adult Sophie will fall for Jimbo Jones and they'll eventually get married. And it will all be officiated by a hologram of her Rabbi Grandpa Hyman, who, if you remember, died in season 26. Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz. The Muppets Go medieval star Troy McClure and lawyer and part-time babysitter Lionel Hutz haven't appeared on our screens for a very long time. And out of respect for the late and great actor, his characters were retired. Despite their absence today, however, Troy is still seen in the future. In Lisa's Wedding, Troy is a math teacher for PepsiCo, teaching addition and subtraction to children all across the country using refreshing Pepsi products. Oh, Troy, we miss you. Uta Zorka. Uta made his first ever appearance in Treehouse of Horror before making the leap into the canon show. Now, Uta does not actually appear in any future episodes in The Simpsons, but The Simpsons comic books do provide a glimpse of what's to come for him. In issue 47, which is set in the far, far future, Uta has grown up to become a film, theatre and holodeck star. And he owes his great success to Bar, who sets him on a diet of eating only fish logs. So to pay him back, Uta gives a dying Bart his stomach. It's comic logic, so let's just go with it. Waylon Smithers. Poor Smithers, utterly infatuated with a man who will never reciprocate his feelings.
I'm in love!
Whoop-de-doo, sir.
And sadly it looks like that Waylon will have a pretty tragic future too. In about 8 years into the future, Smithers will try to get injections to turn him heterosexual.
I love boobies!
When Smithers finds out that the love of his life is getting married, he'll jump into a power plant silo and is presumed dead, cause taking a massive jump to the year 1 million AD, Mr. Burns is a cyborg, and who is following him but a faithful robotic lapdog called Smithers.